I know we all enjoy watching nature programs. I'm sure that we do. There's all types of different types of programs, and a lot of them have to do with the animal kingdom and the photography this day and age, and where these photographers go and how they get pictures under the water or on top of mountains and who knows everywhere else is absolutely amazing. I know that I enjoy some of these documentaries. There's the Blue Planet. Some of you have probably seen that. And I think there's our Frozen Planet, also very beautiful photography and amazing footage of the animals and the animal kingdom. And isn't it this week or last week, some of you may have been very interested in Shark Week. That's certainly advertised by whatever station it is that has them. And a lot of people enjoy, of course, documentaries of Africa and the lions chasing the prey and all that drama that goes with that. Now, more and more people, unfortunately, I think are beginning to believe that there is a physical explanation for everything that takes place on our planet. In other words, that goes back to evolution. It all is by chance, and it's developed by natural selection, and you can explain everything away by natural means and physical explanation. Scientific materialists say that everything's determined by physics. Even our thinking and our mind, it all goes back and all be mathematically determined based on physics, everything physical. And unfortunately, more people are probably coming to that because we believe in evolution. God is being pushed out of the picture, and that's all life is all about. So get all you can while you can, and when it's over, that's the end of it. They say that humans are sure that we're complex systems, but we're material. We have a material brain, and that's all there is to it, our brain, our physical body. We're very clever animals. We're just further along in the evolutionary cycle than, let's say, our younger cousins, whatever these advanced animals are. They're just a little bit behind us in this whole progress and process of evolution. God, again, is removed from the picture. More and more today. Now, religious people, of course, see man as being more than just an animal, just a physical component. There's more to man. The human mind is more than just being physical, being human. In other words, they would say, well, man has a soul. I don't necessarily mean an immortal soul, but man has his own conscience and his free will, his awareness, his self. He has a soul, as many people refer to it. Humans can choose to ignore instinct or impulse if we want. We make choices. We can determine to do that. We can resist impulses for good or moral reasons. We have that choice. We analyze often, well, what is fair? You might say, well, you've driven me to church the last 4 weeks. It's my turn. Or I should reciprocate. I should take you next month. We analyze that and consider that in our thinking, in our mind. We can think abstractly. We can say, well, that's a man, that's a woman. Now, animals can do that. As a matter of fact, some of our pets, maybe our dog, you often hear, well, he doesn't like men. He'll bark and growl at the men, but he likes a woman, or vice versa. So animals can recognize if you're a man or a woman, but animals can't say like humans can, well, he's very masculine, or she has a lot of feminine poise. She carries a lot of dignity. Those are abstract things. Animals can't contemplate that the way humans do. That's a part of our nature, our mind. We can have self-reflection. We can contemplate the past and weigh it and determine things based on the past. We can, let's say, design a house in our head. That's the way I want it to look. And we consider, a beaver doesn't say, well, this year I'm going to have the bedroom over here, and then next year they don't think that way. It's instinct. Animals can't contemplate in their own mind in the same way a human might. Well, my master, he's taken me for a walk in the rain the last 3 days. I really appreciate that. I'm gonna fetch the paper for this next week when the paper boy throws it. I'm gonna make it up. I don't think that way. Humans can think that way. You know, there was the movie, I don't remember when it was made, it's some years ago now, but they replay it quite often, and I find myself watching it once again because it's a kind of intriguing science fiction movie. Some of you are familiar with the movie I, Robot, and Will Smith was in that. He was I think he worked for the police department. And in one portion of this particular movie, Will, for whatever reason, I don't remember, there's a young 12-year-old girl, and he and the girl are in a car, and there's an accident, and they go into the water, and the car is sinking. Well, these robots, this is 50 years from now, and robots are all over, and they're designed and programmed to help and aid and assist humans. So the robot dives in after the both of them as the car's sinking, and Will's in there, and this 12-year-old. Well, the robot calculates that the probability of Will being saved is a little greater than the 12-year-old, so the robot saves him. You know, you're in danger, you're in danger. And Will is telling the robot, save the girl, save the girl. But he won't listen. He's already calculated the probability. So Will is saved, and unfortunately, the girl goes down with the automobile, and her life is lost. So the robot, all it had was programmed this probability to consider. It didn't have the human compassion. It didn't think about, well, what is more noble, as a human might say, well, we'll save the girl. We'll save the child first, not just calculate it mathematically. So humans are different. Let's go to Genesis 1:24. Humans can develop sympathy. Yeah, we can have guilt as well. We're not just trained like an animal. The book of Genesis discusses origins. This is our orientation. This is how we believe it all got going. This is what we go back to. This is how it started. We know why we're here. We know how we got here. It goes back to Genesis. It's a very brief sketch, like 1,100 years in the first 12 chapters or so of human history, but this is how it got going. God is the creator. This is our worldview. The rest of the world, it's more and more evolution, and it's all a physical experience, and so when it's over, it's over. That isn't how we think, despite what more and more in society might. Genesis 1:24, God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. God saw that was very good. It's a very good thing that I've created here, the entire earth and all of the animals. But now he said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Now we have something different. Man is a notch above this animal kingdom. We'll make him in our image, in our likeness. He's going to have dominion over everything else. The fish in the sea, the fowl, the cattle, over all the earth and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Man is not just an animal. He's clearly distinct from the animal kingdom. He was not only to be superior to animals. Okay, his mind is a little sharper. It's not just that, but he was also after God's image. There was a component in the man and the woman that didn't exist in the animal kingdom. God is moral. You know, God is said to be righteous. He has righteousness. God is a thinking, planning being. He has righteousness. Animals don't have righteousness. We're in God's image to a certain degree. Angels had free will. Angels are not animals like the animal kingdom. Remember Lucifer? He had a choice. He had pride, vanity, lust, corrupted him. He had the ability to make choices. 2 Peter 2, verse 4, remember that? I'll just mention it to you. 2 Peter 2:4 talks about the angels who sinned. They make choices. God, of course, doesn't sin, but he has righteousness. God thinks, God acts according to righteousness. Man acts according to what he thinks is right and wrong. Angels were able to do that. There's no verse in the Bible that ever says, and the animals who sinned. This herd of animals that sinned against God. Well, there's nothing like that. No reference to animals sinning, even if they kill a man. And that happened. And so that animal sinned against God. They can't. But men can. There's a likeness to God as far as mind. Look at Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3:19. We're contrasting, as an introduction here, the difference between humans and animals. That's getting more blurred today. I've commented on that before. Becoming more blurred. The animals, well, they're just our younger brothers. And we're all a part of this family on the earth. Sometimes there's more concern shown about to animals than people. More compassion. Now, I'm not talking about justifying cruelty to animals. I'm just saying the lines are blurred. Made in the image of God doesn't mean very much anymore. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 19, it says, whatever befalls the son of men, people, befalls beasts. What happens? We live, we grow old, our body gives out, it dies, go into the earth. Same thing. Whatever happens to the sons of men befalls beasts. Even one thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. The body grows old, tired, eventually expires. They all have one breath, so that the man has no preeminence above a beast. We decay, they decay. Kind of bleak in one sense, but it goes on. For all is vanity. All go to one place. They're buried. All are of dust, and they turn to dust again. Who knows the spirit of man that goes upward? Oh, that spirit goes back to God. What's in man's mind, that spirit goes to God. It goes upward, but the spirit of the beast goes down to the earth, and it's gone. The animal's buried, so is the spirit, figuratively speaking. But the spirit of man that's in the human, in the image of God, goes back to God. God holds that or stores that. That's who we are. That's recorded. No recording of the animals. But of men, they're different. Animals do have a consciousness, that's true. Animals have an ability to reason. They can even solve some problems if they're facing them. They have certain emotions. We see that in animals. But they lack the spiritual element humans have. They don't have a spirit, which is called the spirit in man. We have that. We're of the human kind, made in the image of God to a degree. We make moral choices and decisions. That, of course, is the heart of the problem in the world and our society today. We don't know about the spiritual. We don't contemplate the spiritual and the origin of the spiritual. It's what's politically correct, what fits into society's thinking today. How do we feel? What's important is how we feel about something, our feelings, not what's morally correct. We're going to say what's morally correct. What's your idea? So the spirit in man, and all humans have this, the spirit in man is what gives humans understanding and spiritual potential. And it separates us. There's a gulf. No matter how intelligent an animal is, and never go anywhere near or bridge the gulf between an animal and a human. There's a spiritual dimension in the mind of a human that makes us different. Look at Job 32. Read a couple verses related to this. Job 32, verse 8. This is our worldview. This is where we come from as a people, as a church, in contemplating the world and mankind. how we would treat our neighbor, another human, as opposed to an animal. Though we would be, civil or kind to animals, as we should be, not abusive. Well, Job 32 and verse 8, but there is a spirit in man, some spiritual component. There's a spirit there. And the breath of the Almighty gives him understanding. We communicate with the Almighty. Animals don't. Zechariah 12, verse 1. Zechariah 12, verse 1. Here it says in Zechariah 12, well, this is just a little glimpse of how the scriptures point out that the human mind has something that you can't explain away physically. Otherwise, we'd be on the level of an animal. Maybe a little more advanced, but still an animal. Zechariah 12:1, God says that he forms the spirit of man within him. Gives man a spirit. Let's make man in our image, our likeness, a consciousness, an awareness, a potential. Proverbs 16:32, we find that the spirit is something that we can control. At least we have a say about it. We don't have built-in instinct only. We make choices. Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger, you decide whether to be slow or not. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty. He who rules his spirit, we rule the spirit. We control our spirit, or attempt to. Then he who takes a city. We have choices to make, decisions. We have our own mind, how we think and ponder and weigh and evaluate. We make those choices, and more, somebody says, well, I just have a temper. Well, that's just me. I'm jealous. That's just the way I am. Well, why not change that? So the Spirit is the source of human intellect and free will. Animals are without that, certainly to the same degree. Look at Romans 8:15. We can actually, as humans, go to God and pray from the heart. Romans 8:15. Nobody's ever said, well, where's your dog? Scampy. Where's Scampy? He's upstairs praying. I don't know anything about that, contemplate anything like that. An awareness, a communication with God, a supreme being. Romans 8:15. If we've not received a spirit of bondage to fear, but we have received a spirit of adoption, we cry, Dear Father. There's an emotion, there's a communication with God, with the Creator, that we read of in Genesis chapter 1. A relationship, an evaluation of that relationship, and how am I doing, and am I letting down, or I feel good about what I'm doing. Moral assessment. All of that's of the human plane. God gave us that. This spirit that goes back to God, and all of what we are is recorded on that. The best way to explain it. So we've not received a spirit of bondage again to fear, but we've received the spirit of adoption. We cry, Abba, dear Father. The Spirit then itself bears witness with our spirit. We're the children of God. There's a spiritual communication. You sense something. You perceive it. It's a spiritual. It's not just physical. We experience those things as human beings. Colossians 4 and verse 2. Colossians 4, verse 2 tells us, continue in prayer and watch the same with thanksgiving. We can be appreciative. a sense of appreciation, thankful to God for what He's done. We really appreciate it. We're to be thankful to God. We sense what He's done, His goodness. We conclude that God is good, or God is merciful. God's long-suffering. We're appreciative. We're thankful. We pray that. Animals don't know anything about any of that kind of thing. Never could. You couldn't train them to have this awareness, this sense, this mind. So we have a conscience. And that's well, you might say the title of the message today, kind of the introduction to it. The conscience. What does the Bible say about our conscience? I guess that's the title. Our conscience. Now, here's the definition of a conscience. I guess we basically know what that is. Definition of a conscience: the sense of what is right or wrong in one's conduct or motives, impelling on toward right actions. Our conscience weighs whether it was right or whether it was wrong or good or bad or what our motives are. And hopefully our conscience impels us to do something. My conscience is bothering me. I better do such and such. I think I better do this. Point number 2, or the second definition. So it's a sense of what is right or wrong in one's conduct or motives, impelling on toward right actions. Ethical or moral principles that control or inhibit the actions or thoughts of an individual. Ethical, moral principles. That's what your conscience is. Can your conscience be your guide? Well, it kind of depends on what shaped it. What has shaped your conscience? Our conscience is to help keep us on the right path. Well, I can't do that. That would bother my conscience. I would feel terrible. I can't do that. Your conscience is supposed to help keep us on the right path, but it doesn't define sin. Your conscience could never define it. God defines what's right and wrong. He says what's good and evil. Only He says that. It's not the majority in society. It's not somebody else's decision. God decides and defines sin. That, of course, is a concern today, and I don't mean only for young people, but for society in general, real concern today as to what's shaping the conscience of our neighbors, our society, our nation. What's shaping our conscience? What bothers us or what doesn't? What do we think is good or bad? Now, B.C. Forbes, he's the original founder of Forbes magazine, and then I think his son took over, and Steve Forbes, it would be his grandson, I believe. He had the Forbes magazine. It is still being published today. He said, the man who has won millions at the cost of his conscience is a failure. If you've won millions, but you defiled your conscience in order to do that, you're a failure. Now, not everybody would feel that. Well, I'll take the millions, thank you. I'm not going to bother my conscience. So sometimes it doesn't appear as though it always does bother somebody's conscience, or maybe a repairman, mechanic, and they know they're taking advantage of you, and it doesn't bother their conscience at all. Or else they stuff it or bury it. There's certainly many of those in society. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Romans chapter 2, verse 14. God said, I'll make man in my image. We have a self-awareness. Everybody has a conscience. Every human's born with a conscience. There is a built-in sense of good or bad. Now how it's developed and what happens when we're children, parents help guide and build and nurture a child's conscience. That's okay. That's fine to do that. Or no, we don't do that. Parents help shape that, although individuals are individuals. And we all kind of grow up in our own sense of self-awareness, our own, what we think is our conscience. Sometimes one child, the same household, that would bother them. They can't do that. They feel guilty. They might even go to their parents and say, well, I just have to tell mom or dad, you know, I did such and such. The other child is, what are you doing? Don't tell them that. Well, it bothered the one. Well, people are different. Romans 2:14. For when the Gentiles, which don't have the law formally given to them at Mount Sinai, like the Jews, when they, even though they don't have it formally listed, they do by nature the things that are in the law, like they have a society, a community, that they know you don't steal something from somebody else. You don't kill another person. You don't have adultery with somebody else's wife. They have a code, a sense. They know we don't do that. So that's what Paul is addressing. They're not Christians, they're not Jews. For when the Gentiles, which don't have the law given to them specifically, do naturally the things that you would find in the law, because the law makes sense, that God gave, these, not having the law specifically given to them, are like a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their heart, their conscience, bearing witness, their thoughts the same, while accusing or else excusing some. They have a conscience. Of course they do. They're humans. He said, well, when they do what's in the law and their conscience tells them they've done wrong or they've done right based on whether it's in line with God's law by nature, you might say. Now, here's a Sergeant Ray Bars of Midvale, Utah. Sergeant Ray Bars of Midvale, Utah. He works for the Midvale, Utah Police Department. He opened his wallet one day, and he noticed his own driver's license had expired. Got busy and didn't keep up with it. Well, embarrassed at having caught himself red-handed, he had no alternative. He calmly and deliberately pulled out his ticket book and wrote himself a citation. You're guilty. Then Bars took the ticket to the city judge, who fined him $100. He said, how could I give a ticket to anyone else for an expired license in the future if I didn't cite myself? It would bother my conscience. I wouldn't think that was right. Well, here, your license is expired. You have an obligation to pay the judge. When I found myself, and then I didn't do it. Well, good for him. You know what most would have done, not writing myself some ticket. He said, no, I wouldn't feel right. It's only right. It's only honest. I couldn't sleep at night. You've heard that phrase. I couldn't live with myself every time I gave somebody else a ticket. Well, good for him. Not everybody's that way, of course. Our conscience needs shaping, the right kind of development. A society should promote having a certain kind of conscience. What was it the other day? Somebody was mentioning on some talk show or something they were talking about. This was a lady stood up and she says, you know, I get on the bus and there's all kinds of, there's boys or men sitting there. None of them get up and give me a seat, she said. None of them do. She said, it used to be they always would do it. Now, is the conscience of the boys or the men sitting there? It doesn't bother them a bit. It's like they don't even know that's what should be done. So a society builds into its structure what should teach somebody what their conscience should feel. Why the boys and the men should, oh, I felt terrible. Here, ma'am, have a seat. They're not thinking that. Think of it at all. Did it bother their conscience? Of course not. She's a person, I'm a person. I was here first. So it has to be shaped and developed. Humans justify, we know, horrible atrocities to other human beings. Now, God tells us, you love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what's my neighbor? Everybody else but you. A Christian loves their neighbor, not mankind. Well, they're beneath us and we think we're better than they are, and they don't have the money we have, or they don't have the background. Look at these people, and we don't have to feel bad about treating them a certain way. Of course, there's just horrible atrocities taking place, and bother their conscience? No, they're just dogs anyway. Jews felt that way about Gentiles. It didn't bother them. So we have to have our conscience shaped. It has to be taught. We have to, of course, accept what God says as well. We can excuse our actions. We all know that. Well, sometimes we also have to, we condemn ourselves when it's not necessary. I've talked to people over the years. They would say something, and sometimes you'd have to say, you shouldn't do that. Look at how this person felt, or look at what you did. That wasn't right. You should feel badly about that. Or they would say something, I'd say, well, you don't have to worry about that. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, it bothered my conscience. You don't have to worry. That wasn't bad. That's all right. So our conscience can go either way. We can be self-condemning when it's not necessary, or we can excuse and justify ourselves. Our conscience cannot be our guide unless our conscience is the same one God has. Now imagine Jesus never had a guilty conscience. Any of you ever have a guilty conscience? Well, sure, if you're human. Jesus never had a guilty conscience about something he said. He never said, I should have never said that. I'm going to go back and apologize to Peter. Anything he said or anything he did or thought ever. Never a guilty conscience. Well, that, of course, is something very hard to contemplate for us. But humans can justify horrible atrocities, I think we know. So the Bible shows that we must care for, nurture, and protect our conscience. It gets to the very heart of who we are. What's our conscience telling us? That's who we are. Very vital. Look at Romans 14:22. Romans 14:22. It says in Romans 14:22, do you have faith? Well, have it to yourself before God. Well, we all stand before God. We don't answer to other human beings. We are judged by God. Our conscience is between us and God as far as our relationship with Him. Well, do you have faith? Well, have it yourself before God. Happy is he that condemns not himself in the things that he allows. Well, good for you. Happy are you if what you're doing, you're not condemning yourself. You don't have to know, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know I feel guilty. Or sometimes people leave the church, I know I'm running from God. I know in the back of my mind, I should be going to church. I should be doing this or that. Happy is the person that condemns not himself in the thing which he does, and he that doubts is damned if he eats. Now this is talking about eating meat. Some people believed it was wrong to eat meat altogether. They were vegetarians. So they were feeling guilty about that. He that doubts is damned if he eats, because he eats not of faith. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. It's saying your conscience is so important that even if you thought it was wrong and you were convicted this is wrong, even though it might not be, you're still doing what you think is wrong. That affects you. Affects your heart, your conscience. So that's whatsoever is not of faith then. And you're doing it in thinking you're doing wrong and doing it anyway. Well, God takes note of that. 1 Corinthians 8 and verse 7. Here is the account where a lot of the meat that people would buy at the supermarket back in the early church, first century, it had already gone to the temple, and the priests and they had the temple ceremony, and they blessed, put a blessing on the meat. All right, it's blessed. Get it out of here and get it to the market and let people buy it. Well, Christians weren't sure. Well, what about this? Should we eat that meat? It's been blessed by the demons, often the pagan temple. Well, the Apostle Paul said, look, that's not going to change. It's not going to change the meat. You're not worshiping in the temple. You're not going in the temple to worship. Okay, don't worry about where the meat came from. It's clean meat. Buy it. Don't worry about it. 1 Corinthians 8 and verse 7, howbeit there is not in every man that confidence, because a lot of people came out of those pagan churches. And that's what they did when they ate the meat. They thought, oh, this is wonderful, blessed meat. We're becoming holy, eating this meat blessed in the temple. Well, then they come into the church. They don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want that stuff. They associated it with the past. It bothered their conscience. So he says, look, not everybody has this knowledge and awareness that it doesn't matter. Didn't hurt the meat. For some with conscience of the idol and where the meat's from, unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience is weak. It's defiled. Maybe other members kind of pressuring them. Oh, come on, eat it. What's the matter with you? Don't you know better? You can eat that. But it's still bothering them. They haven't worked through that. A little bit of pressure. Well, we've seen that in our day and age. And maybe years gone by, somebody coming to the church, they've been drilled into them in their church, you do not drink. Drinking is evil. Look at all the drunken people. Look at the people killed on the highway with all this drunkenness. And the Bible condemns it, and that's in their mind. And they come into the church, and sometimes it's just too much free-flowing alcohol. Members, well, come on, oh, you know, God doesn't say, well, look, Jesus changed the water into the wine. And it's kind of pressuring them, or they saw members over-drinking. Well, they're horrified. Thought I came into God's church. So sometimes there wasn't always the greatest wisdom shown in realizing, look, these people are making adjustments. Give them a chance to sort through. Well, that's where it was with the eating foods offered to idol. And we find the same thing in 1 Corinthians 10:25. We're talking about our conscience, how important it is. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:25, whatever is sold in the shambles, the meat market, just go ahead and eat. Don't ask, well, did this go to the temple first, and who blessed it, and all. Don't worry about it. Just buy the meat and eat it. Whatever sold in the shambles, that eat. You don't have to ask any questions. It's not a matter of your conscience. The meat will not affect your conscience. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Now, if any of them that are not in the church bid you to a feast, and you be disposed to go, it kind of sounds like you're forced into it. If any of them bid you to a feast, and you'd be disposed to go, whatever they set before you, eat it. Don't ask any questions. Wait a minute. Did this go to the temple first? Which supermarket did you get this from? Because I've checked them all out. The ones that come from the temple first and the ones that don't. Don't ask that. It's not clean and unclean meats. It's meats offered to idols. They serve the meal. Don't worry about it. Don't ask any questions. Whatever's set before you, don't ask any question. Don't worry about your conscience. But if somebody specifically wants to bring up, oh, guess what? This has been offered unto the idols. It's holy meat. This is a special meat we're having tonight. The gods have blessed it. Now they make a distinction. This is offered in sacrifice to an idol. Then don't eat it. Because now there's an important distinction that's important for them. Eat not for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. He says, now when I'm talking about conscience, I'm saying not your own. You know it doesn't matter. But the other person, for their conscience. They've made an issue of it. Oh, we got this holy meat, and this is wonderful. We'll be, blessed of God. And wait a minute. That isn't what I think of in God, and so on. They make a distinction of that. So that makes a difference in the judgment you would make. Maybe it's similar that around Christmas time, sometimes family members, you're invited for Christmas dinner. Well, generally, we say, go to the dinner. It's only a dinner. The family's going to be there. Nothing wrong with having a meal. You have to eat on December 25th. they're inviting you, go ahead and go. But if they're going to make a big deal, we're going to be celebrating Christmas by our Christmas dinner, well, now you're making an issue. Now you're drawing a distinction, and I'm going to give the impression that, well, sure, yes, I'm promoting Christmas just like everybody else. You say, well, no, I'm sorry. I really don't promote or celebrate Christmas in the Christmas dinner. It's how it's presented. Come to dinner, fine. And that's kind of the sense of what Paul's instructing them here as to how it's presented. They don't say anything, don't worry about it. Well, we must have something reliable to shape our conscience. Every human has a conscience. What's shaping it? What's it like? Or sometimes it's said, where's your conscience? You come to kind of dumbfounded. Well, where was everybody's conscience? Didn't that bother them? Well, no, didn't seem to. So something has to shape our conscience. It can't be popular opinion. Well, what's everybody else doing? Well, what do most people think? Can't be fads. What's everybody into now? Can't be human reasoning. Look at John 18:14. John 18:14. Here, the final few days of the life of Christ. Here's Caiaphas, the high priest. They're in a dilemma. A lot of people are following Jesus and impressed by him, think he's a man of God. So Caiaphas, they're threatening to lose some of their seniority and influence. John 18:14, Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Would it bother his conscience? Didn't look like it. Well, for the good of the people here, this godly man, justified it away. Wasn't going to bother, oh, this is for the people. So we have that proclivity as human beings. Look at ISIS, the atrocities. And to some of them, they think they're doing it in the name of religion. They think they're being righteous. It's just a backdrop where they can express their hatred in many respects. Oh, we're doing it for Allah, for religious reasons. It's terrible atrocities. And people are commenting, we haven't seen anything like this in a long time. A real brutality to our fellow man. Where's your conscience? Didn't bother them a bit. And all in the name of religion. I found this quote of Sidney J. Harris said, once we assuage our conscience by calling something a necessary evil, which Caiaphas did. Oh, this is a necessary evil. I know he's helped a lot of people, but look, we got to get rid of this man for the good of all of the people here, all of the Jews. Once we assuage our conscience by calling something a necessary evil, it begins to look more and more necessary and less evil. Of course it does. Where's society going today? Oh, it's necessary. Well, this is the way we got to do business. Well, this is the way we got to get elected. Oh, this is the way we got to do this. More and more necessary, less and less evil. Where's the conscience? 2 Samuel 24:10. 2 Samuel 24:10. It says here, and David's heart smote him, his conscience, his awareness, his sense of himself. His conscience smote him after he had numbered the people. He was told, David, don't do this. We don't need to number. You know that God doesn't want that. You're trying to decide how strong you are. Count the people. Oh, man, we're powerful. Don't do it. Well, he did, and his conscience smote him. Remember when he cut off part of Saul's clothing? He came in the cave. Oh, his conscience bothered him. This was God's anointed. It wasn't for me to do. Healthy conscience. But then Bathsheba, well, that's another story. That's another temptation. And the conscience wasn't quite what it needed to be at that moment, but it certainly was very keen at other times, very godly. God said he was a man after my own heart. A godly conscience. about most things, but not all. Well, how much do we value a clear conscience? Is there anything better than a clear conscience? You want more money or fame or what? How about a clear conscience? Look at what Paul said in Romans 9 and verse 1. How many of us have been able to say, I'm sure at one time or another, well, my conscience is clear on this. I have a clear conscience. I know I didn't do anything wrong or whatever. That's a good feeling. That's the one God's people should have as much as possible. Romans 9 and verse 1, Paul says, oh, look, I say in the truth in Christ, I'm not lying. My conscience bears witness. So I can't just get away with it. Nobody can prove anything different. My own conscience tells me that I'm telling the truth. Today, it's a matter of prove it. Where's the conscience? Mentioned that before. Somebody gets caught, they deny it. Well, we got this proof. Well, okay, I did that much. Well, no, we've got more. Well, I did that much more. Keeps going until finally they can't weasel out anything. Then they're contrite. No conscience involved. I'll read Acts 23:1. It's the same idea. Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said, men and brethren, I've lived in all good conscience before God until this day. I've got a clear conscience. He didn't mean that he's never did anything that bothered his conscience, because in Romans 7 he said, boy, the things that sometimes I should do, I don't do it. And the things that I know I shouldn't do, I do that. And he was lamenting his conscience bothered him. He did things he shouldn't at times. But he meant as far as his work, his apostleship, what God gave him to do, he said, I've lived in all good conscience. I've not done this for money. I've not tried to get some kind of following. I've not tried to be impressive to anyone else. I've not had any kind of wrong motive. My conscience is clear in what my ministry and work's been about. May not have done it as well as I could have. Somebody could have done it better, but my conscience is clear. Any of us ever had a smitten conscience? Well, sure. John 8 and verse 9. John 8, verse 9. A lot of things in the Bible about our conscience. Well, this is the account they brought the woman taken in adultery in John chapter 8, and Jesus wrote on the ground, and they were accusing. They were all righteous about this woman caught in the act, and Jesus wrote on the ground. Finally said, okay, all right, let's have the righteous one here that never makes a mistake. You throw the first stone. And he talked about, just life itself. So in John 8 and verse 9, they which heard what Jesus had to say, being convicted by their own conscience. Well, good for them for that at that point. Their conscience bothered them. Here we are condemning this woman like we're just pure in all that we do. And got to their conscience. What did it say in Acts chapter 2? Peter gave that sermon, and it says, and they were pricked in their heart. Don't tell me we've killed the one that God had sent to us and had prophesied. Finally dawned on them, and they were pricked to their heart. Their conscience smote them. Terrible feeling. Terrible feeling when your conscience, oh no, why did I do that? Why did I say that? I can't believe I did that. So we must, as people, we must attend to a guilty conscience. We must attend to our own conscience. That's who we are. We first find out if we've done wrong. Maybe we think we're guilty of something we're not. 1 Timothy 4, 1 Timothy, a few more scriptures. 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2. Now, the Holy Spirit tells us in 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2 that in the latter times, when Satan's really active, a lot of people will depart from the faith. They'll listen to wrong spirits, spirits of a feeling. What are we feeling? Oh, it's a feeling. And there's a spirit generating that sometimes. Giving heed to seducing kind of spirits, wrong teachings and ideas and doctrines of of demons. Speaking lies, of course, hypocritical, having their conscience seared. A seared conscience. Instead of a healthy conscience that bothers it, it's just seared, it's just numb. Didn't bother. Something that should bother us. Well, how do you feel about it? I don't care. Seared conscience. What sears a conscience? A hatred, anger, lust, jealousy, despair, no God. Everything's physical. We're just animals. We're further along. We're not in the image of God. No spirit given us by God to give us a mind. Who cares about the conscience? What do I care about that? Titus 1:15. Titus 1:15. In Titus 1:15 it says, to the pure, everything's pure. God's people are to strive for a pure mind. Our mind doesn't immediately go to something evil, sinful. We sometimes say, well, right to the gutter. We don't think that way. We try to stop ourselves. We unfortunately live in this society. Hear certain things, and certain things come to mind immediately, unfortunately. But to the pure, all things are pure. But unto them that are defiled and unbelieving, nothing really is pure anymore. Even their mind and their conscience is defiled. Take advantage of somebody. Do things to be. Where's your conscience? Doesn't bother them at all. Think about the atrocities in society. Some poor young lady raped. Group of guys. Where's your conscience doing that? Nowhere. Didn't bother him. Well, thankfully, a smitten heart or a conscience can be cleansed. It's a gift from God. God gives us this spirit. We have a mind. We make choices. There's a spiritual dimension to our thought processes. And when that conscience is bothering us, we can get it cleansed, taken care of. It says, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge our conscience? All of us look back in our life and say, I wish I would have never done that. But that's the past. Paul said that. All things are the past. I put that in the past. It's not on my conscience. I remember it, but I don't go around with a continuous guilty conscience. We've been purged. Our conscience has been purged. Paul said, I did it in ignorance. Or even if we didn't do it in ignorance, we can go to God, ask for forgiveness. 1 John chapter 3, verse 20, two more verses. 1 John 3:20. What's a benefit of a healthy and clear conscience? 1 John 3:20, it says, if our heart condemns us, well, God's greater than that. Thankfully so. Can address that. Go to God, but you have to address that. We cannot just allow and keep stuffing or burying something that's bothering our conscience. That's not a good healthy thing, like we read before. Something becomes more and more necessary, less and less evil. So we are to address our conscience. That's our heart. If our heart condemns us, God's greater than that. Thankfully so. He knows everything. Go to him and talk about it. If our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence towards God. We're confident, not because we think we're perfect, but our conscience is not smiting us about what we're doing, how we're living, what our motive is. We have confidence towards God. What a good feeling. What would you pay for that? What would you give for it? Well, we are increasingly living in a world with a conscience problem. Not that everybody in the world is going to just have no conscience, but it's going to be deceived in the future as well, while you're going to have armies fighting Christ. Where's your conscience? We're doing the right thing. Don't even know. But we're living in a world with a conscience problem. Our conscience is at the heart of who we are. It determines our relationship with God, how we feel about ourselves, how we walk, how we live, what's on our conscience. We all have to address it from time to time. We must maintain a healthy conscience. And it has to, of course, come from God's words, not our own. Well, everybody else thinks such and such. It's shaped by God's Spirit. He's the one that gave it the capacity to have a conscience, a self-awareness. Satan's conscience is seared. It's gone. Nothing's going to affect his conscience. Satan's not going to tempt somebody. Satan's not going to be able to sift Peter, as Jesus said, and he sifts Peter and said, I feel so bad about that, what I did to Peter, and apologize. He doesn't have a conscience, has hatred for God, God's people, has a seared conscience, buried it long ago with pride, lust, hatred for God. Can't reach his conscience, not going to change. It's seared, gone. Well, we not only here in the church have a conscience, which all people have, to one degree or another, but God's Spirit is at work in our mind to give us a godly conscience, a godliness that has a different dimension, like David. Heart smote him when he cut off Saul's skirt. Different conscience, shaped by the Spirit of God. No, everything in life cannot be explained by material or physics or mathematics. There's something else going on. There's a spirit essence. It's in everybody's mind, every human being, but then there can be the added Holy Spirit. It really shapes the mind, the conscience, the spirituality. Don't ever forget the spiritual component that exists in life. It's there. It's real. It's a mystery to most, but it's very real. Our conscience is at who we are, as it says in 1 Timothy 3:9, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience.